Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the interview series, Fintech Making Sense of Data. Very happy today to introduce Deb Lorenzen, running the enterprise data at State Street, and also one of the chairs at a board of a $2.3 billion US national bank. Welcome, Deb. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ethan. Thanks for having me across. This is great.
Perfect. So we've spoke a couple of times in the past, but there's still a few questions I'm yet to ask you. So looking forward to covering those today. So starting from the top, really, what was it that brought you to the financial space working with data?
Yeah, it's been a fun journey, I have to say. I think what brought me initially was just an interest in finance. I wanted to work on Wall Street. It sounded interesting, right? And then as I worked my way through university, I started a job working for a small bank as a teller, as many people do, right? Standing and serving customers directly. And I joined that just at the time when a lot of smaller banks were consolidating. And so without intending to get involved in mergers and acquisition or anything like that, I was involved and caught up in these changes. And it turns out, even though we didn't talk about it this way back then, that all of that data movement was really about data. We just thought we were in the middle of changing from one bank to another, but it really was making sure that this customer's information made it successfully over to the whoever had bought them at the time. And then my early career was just kind of a flurry of a lot of banks consolidating. And again, all that was just about data. So without intending to, I became actively involved in data.
Excellent. I suppose it's a fairly unique avenue into data. I think a lot of people could probably empathize with the sort of falling into the data space in a natural way. So I'm often speaking to leaders in the Finserve and Fintech sector, and even though the industries are very similar in some ways, there's a lot that separates them as well. How does working with data compare between the two in your experience?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity in my career to sort of see both sides of the trade in that. I've worked for large global financial institutions almost all of my career, and landed there because of all of those mergers and acquisitions that were happening. I got bought back in the day into a really large financial institution. And then in my later career, I've had this opportunity to work for a national bank in the US that's relatively small. And one of the challenges that we all have if we're working, especially on the big side of finance, is understanding our customers and being close enough to our customers. And that's the place that these new fintechs have really done a great job. A lot of fintechs are being built up around a particular community, right? So they're aiming, younger customers who want to use their phones to pay for things, or they're a group targeting a specific population, Muslim Americans in a particular city. Maybe they're getting a society together, a social group together. And they probably don't start off thinking about being banks. We have challenges, though, around the world in large populations that are underbanked, as we say, folks who don't necessarily have access to the big banks. And the big banks don't understand how to reach these customers all the time. And then the fintech step in and understand how to reach the customers, but maybe not how to be a proper bank. So I think there's a lot of opportunity between the fintech sector and the large bank sector if we can figure out how to partner to successfully support their organizations or their groups of people.
Yeah, I think you touched into something really significant there about the main reason for the success of fintechs, if you like, which is those populations of people that traditionally weren't targeted by banks and are underbanked, and certain demographics, nationalities, and young people being one of them as well. So the need for fintechs is clear in that sense. But how does working with data specifically in these large financial organizations and the ability to reach people in society, how do they use data to reach these people and to target customers?
Yeah, so if you work in a large bank, you care about certain aspects of data. And what you really care about is managing, controlling, and protecting data, right? It's the old adage of why do people rob banks? So, well, it's because that's where the money is, right? And so as someone who works in the banking sector, we're always focused on making sure that we have safety and soundness and protecting the assets, the data, right? That's all the assets are, is data about people and about whatever assets that they control, that they manage, that are theirs, right? So we're very focused on that, and we spend a lot of time on that data. Then welcome, into the conversation a group of people who are potentially underbanked right now, right? And then the fintech comes along, and the fintech knows through data and understands that particular customer base, and they know what matters to that customer base, and they know how to engage and how to, I would say, evaluate that customer base to determine who's creditworthy and who's not creditworthy. And they look at it through a different lens using data than maybe the bigger banks do. And they can make these better evaluations because they understand the community, right? And then the question comes is, how do we find out how to take our sort of big bank rule set about who we are and what makes us a good credit opportunity, right? And then we partner with one of these fintechs who really understands a particular community. And the data is not going to map perfectly, right? Because the things that the big bank might be looking for are not necessarily the same data points that matter to a given community. So how do we map those two things together? And how do we, on the big bank side, come to understand what actually matters for this community might not be the same things that we've traditionally looked for, right? And that's where the data gets. It's all about data, right? How you're connecting these two communities together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you get that harmony between large traditional banking organizations or financial services working alongside fintechs to hopefully try and improve their offerings as well, and to tap into these other areas of community, that's when we see quite a lot of the interesting innovations happen between the two. That perfect marriage of everything behind the scenes that traditional Finserve can do with the new technical advantages and innovations created with the sort of younger fintechs. I think it's really, really interesting to see on that side. So in the response to the rise of fintechs, how do you think traditional financial organizations are going to be able to use data to keep up with these smaller fintechs that are more agile and can create change very quickly? And do they even need to keep up? Do the fintechs, are they a significant challenge to them at this point?
Yeah, in change, there's opportunity. And right now, there's a lot of change in the marketplace, or there's a lot of potential change in the marketplace, specifically for financial services. And so, of course, there's opportunity in that. I would be remiss in this conversation not to say that the big banks have a long history of using data to create underbanked communities, I'd have to say, right? We have this tradition, unfortunately, of things like redlining, where we chose places where we wouldn't loan money to. And we simply wouldn't loan money to a particular neighborhood, right? If you lived in that neighborhood, you were redlined, meaning you didn't have the opportunity to access that. We have made rules that have intentionally, and I will say intentionally excluded certain parts of the population. So we have a lot that we need to answer for in the big bank community. And the great thing is that the fintechs are now responding to that, understanding that these populations also need to be supported. So it's quite easy for the big banks to come into these conversations with fintech with all the data and all the understanding we have and sort of try to act like we know everything. And these fintechs don't necessarily. To take advantage of these opportunities and to serve this customer base, the big banks are going to have to stop and think for a minute and change their rules. And if they don't, and that's okay, then the fintechs are going to partner, they're going to learn how to become banks, and that's when the big banks are going to get disintermediated, meaning that customer base is not going to end up. Right now, largely, these fintechs don't necessarily have, they're not necessarily banks. They're not necessarily, with the banking license and all the rest of it, and understanding how the regulators work and following all the regulations, right? So they still, if they want to serve their customers with financial service products, they still need to partner with someone who's on the larger side. That won't be the case forever, right? So into the breach here, in this short period of time where the fintechs haven't become banks necessarily yet, and still need a partnership, either the larger banks are going to figure out how to change their rules, how to peel off some of the history and the legacy of only doing business in a certain particular way, only doing business if these data points are accessible and meet the test that we're accustomed to, right? If we don't, then these fintechs are going to figure out how to become banks themselves, and it's going to change the game completely. And we see that to start happening with some of the more recognizable names, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just touching on that, do you think that would be that's what causes the shift? The groups of society that, as you mentioned, have been redlined previously, that fintechs are happy to work with and happy to offer their services to. Do you think? I imagine that's a huge portion of the population in many cases. Do you think that's how fintechs will, become more established, and gain those licenses to operate in a similar way that big banks? Is it going to be working with the traditionally redline groups that almost flips the switch?
It's either the sort of the egregious examples of redlining, or if you think about all of the regular services that people need to live their daily lives. And one of the big services that happens in the world right now, and has for many, many years, is repatriation of funds. That's a good example, right? Someone emigrates from one place to another place. They get a good job and they're sending money home. That's a pretty normal pattern. There are huge populations that emigrate just for that purpose, so that they can send money home. Most larger financial institutions won't support those payments these days. So folks in those populations have been relegated to using less confident means to send money home, right? Either, the old, wire transfers at a sort of box on the corner where you hand your cash to the guy and he would promise that he would, wire it back. And then on the other end, there was also, a guy who got that money and took it out to the family, right? There's a lot of leakage in that for the people who are actually just trying to send money home, and not as much security as you want. So a fintech can step in and provide more security and safety, where maybe that money can go straight from your phone to the phone of your mom or your family, back home. That feels a lot better for you as an individual, right? And how can the banking environment support that in a way that helps folks being able to send that money from phone to phone, without by using data in some way? And I think there's opportunity there. I'm not necessarily sure the big banks are paying attention to that.
Yeah. I agree with you there, and it's also tapping in again to the speed and accessibility of fintechs and what they can offer, because going to the guys you mentioned on the corner and sending money across the world wasn't an immediate thing. But nowadays, with things like I know people who go on holiday from the UK to parts of Europe, we use things like Monzo, where you can use your the bank card, and not have to pay a charge for exchanging the currency. So there's a lot of quick alterations that fintechs have been able to make for accessibility for not just those smaller sections of society that were redlined, or people that work in a certain capacity, but
Yeah.
also the wider population as well.
Yeah. And in that, you raise a great point, Ethan. In that, some products are going to disappear. And there's, lots of times if you start a company, it doesn't matter if you're a bank or anything else, if you start a company, you get used to this product. So there's a product that you probably never touched or put your hands on, but I did, traveler's checks, right?
Mm.
When I first started traveling, that was how you brought money. You brought US dollar denominated traveler's checks if you went to Europe. And when you went to pay for your hotel in Italy, you pulled out one of your US dollar traveler's checks, right? And the amount of people and time and effort that went into trying to make sure that that was a real traveler's check, and that you didn't come with a fake one, and that you got your money, and the extra time, where today, as you say, you can use one of these fintech services. Someone somewhere is still paying some amount of foreign exchange, but the amount or the percentage of foreign exchange, the fees that you're paying, leakage, is substantially different than the amount of fees, leakage, and cost that I went through to get some traveler's checks at home, and then have them converted into Italian lira at that time, right? A currency which no longer exists even, right? But the opportunities and the security for individuals who are trying to do normal things, right? To pay for your coffee in Poland, right? When you're traveling, the amount of security and safety and comfort you have when you take advantage of these fintechs is so much better than what the traditional banks necessarily could even offer, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to that point that they probably are going to have to offer similar services or keep up in some way, because I know people from sort of my generation and younger are far more interested with the quick service that they can use on the phone, and the sort of catchy taglines, and it's a very different world for fintech compared to traditional Finserve, in not just what they offer, but their appearance in the market as well. So I think that should come into play too. So we often see news about fintechs running into trouble when the economy isn't at its best, which has happened fairly recently as well, in the last 6 months, and with waves of startups sometimes having to shut up shop, which is a shame. But it's something that's a lot rarer for larger and more established financial organizations. So when we look at the next, let's say, 10 years for fintech, what role do you think data will play in ensuring that they can continue to grow in the market and retain their place, and even overtake traditional Finserve?
Yeah, so there are a whole bunch of things to unpack in that, right? Maybe the first place is to say that in the startup world, whether it's fintechs or any other product set, there is going to be a fair bit of churn, right? People come to market with a product and say, this is the best thing that's ever been invented. And it turns out actually someone else already invented it and did it better, right? So there's always going to be a fair bit of churn. You don't see that churn in the same way when it's happening at the larger banks, but it happens at the larger banks all the time. They're always coming up with ideas internal to the bank, right? You kind of think of an umbrella with a whole bunch of products underneath it. There's always new ideas in there. And lots of them don't make it very far, but you don't see it because it's not the company going down, right? So there's some amount of churn on the fintech side that one would take as normal and natural, right? Or someone comes up with a great idea, but then their IT side isn't as strong as it needs to be, so someone else takes that same idea and capitalizes on it in a little bit better way. You also have to remember that most of the big banks are, 200 years old, 300 years old, right? They've been through a lot and they understand a little bit how to weather the storm. We're in a period right now since 2008 that has consistently, since 2008, been tough for the big firms. And I think, and I'm old enough to remember a time before this, it's not always been like this. It's not always been this kind of, a little bit locked down in terms of what new market segments or new customers we're willing to go after. Credit quality hasn't been required to be so high as it's had to be since 2008. And that excludes a lot of people from the market, right? And it's that exclusion of people that's lasted for so long. You can't get a loan to buy a house unless your credit is absolutely perfect and you've got, half the money for the house sitting in your savings account. Who's got that, right? So it's partly the big bank's fault for not serving customers that's allowing all of these opportunities to come up for the fintechs. Just like your example, you want to travel to Europe and you don't want to pay half of the amount of your savings in fees to a big bank just to be able to successfully get a hotel and get breakfast in the morning while you're there. So while the big banks have kept credit so tight, and in the last number of years, and it's been a long time now, right? Since 2008, that's what's creating some of these opportunities. So how can we work together to improve the service using data to a broader population, right? And I know I talk about this in terms of products and customers, but it is all about the data that's involved in, that we need to create these products. It's about the data that we need about the customers to understand exactly who they are and how we can best serve them. So how can we work together? I think that there are still good opportunities for the Finserve community to partner with these great ideas on the fintech side. Again, they're not all going to be either the best idea and they're not all going to be the best technology, right? So as a Finserve person, you have to be thoughtful and evaluate these opportunities as they come along. But if we want to serve a broader market than just the handful of people who have perfect credit today, right? If we want to serve that broader market, we need to tap into these great ideas that are coming up on the fintech side and figure out ways that we on the Finserve side, who understand the rules and the regulations, and we understand how to protect money from the bad guys, we understand how to keep your data safe, we can partner with the people who understand specific communities and who know how to reach those communities and evaluate those communities. And I think that's a win for everyone.
It does certainly sound like that, doesn't it? Like a match made in heaven. Fintechs can focus on the things they've done really well in the sort of last 10 years, sometimes even further back than that when we look at some of the originators like PayPal. So those guys do their job so well. If they could take advantage of all the regulation and licenses that Finserve have, it sounds like it should be a match made in heaven. So hopefully we see that a lot more often.
Yeah, I think there are folks out there trying to do that. We just need to continue the focus in that area.
Absolutely. And I think regardless, fintech are going to continue to grow and to probably, I say dominate the market is a bit too early to say, but definitely move, cover more ground in that area. I definitely think so.
Yeah, I mean, if I look backwards in time, I was a relatively young person working on Wall Street, and someone said to me, like in a hallway conversation, hey, there's this new bookstore online and it seems like it's got legs, and you should probably put some money in that one, buy some stock in this little company. And I was like, oh, that seems interesting. What's the company? Well, it's Amazon. Like that. There's an Amazon in this new set of fintechs that's being created today, right? We just don't know which one. There were thousands of other ones at the same time that Amazon came up, right? Who didn't turn out to be successful in the long run. And it comes down, it's important for the Finserve community to be able to look and honestly analyze what opportunities these things are, and then take advantage of them, right? Work with them, try to support them, fund them, connect with them, partner with them, so that, both we can continue to take care of the financial markets, because it's important for all of us that the financial markets continue to function, and also be able to extend to a larger set of the population.
100%. I completely agree. And it's been really interesting hearing from you, Deb, particularly because of your background in Finserve, but also the extent of your knowledge within fintech as well. It's been great to have somebody who has, terrific knowledge on both sides. So I really appreciate your time in answering my questions and chatting to me. Thank you very much. Everyone, that was Deb Lorenzen, and it was really nice catching up with you, and look forward to our next conversation.
Same. Thanks, Ethan.